You're watching What If the U.S. Lost the Battle of New Orleans Part 2. When we last left off, the U.S. lost the Civil War, and the Confederacy became an independent nation. Russia would not sell Alaska to the Americans because the reason Russia sold Alaska to the Americans because they were worried the British would seize Alaska. But without the British controlling Canada, that would mean the Russians would never have this worry, and so the Russians would keep control of Alaska. The South would likely expand into Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean because they would want to expand into more tropical regions to have more space for plantations. This almost did happen in our timeline, and the U.S. almost invaded Costa Rica and Nicaragua for this reason, but it was outvoted by the northern states. But the Confederacy just being the southern states would mean that they would have no qualms with invading Central American, Caribbean, and Mexican areas. Because Britain helped the Confederacy in the Civil War, the Confederacy would join the Allies. Meanwhile, the U.S. would want to be on whatever side the Confederacy wasn't on, until the U.S. would join the Central Powers. This would mean that when World War I would break out in Europe, it would also break out in America. Alaska would be seized by the U.S. in World War I. Ultimately, the U.S. would win the war in the Americas because industry was more important in World War I than it was in the Civil War, and the U.S. would keep on industrializing, while the Confederacy would linger in a pre-industrial setting. Also, as the U.S. would be industrializing, that would mean that it could utilize new weapons such as tanks and aircraft that the Confederacy would only be able to muster a few of or not at all, meaning the U.S. would be able to overrun the South with tanks, aircraft, and new weaponry. The Central Powers would have also won the war in Europe, because without American troops helping the French and the British at the Second Battle of the Marne, the Germans would have won the Second Battle of the Marne and reached Paris, having punctured through the British and French line. And so, with the fall of Paris, the war would end in Europe with the Central Powers' victory. After the fall of France, Britain would realize it was over and would give up a few African colonies, Malta and Gibraltar, in return for a peace deal. Hitler never would have risen in Germany because the German people would have never felt outraged that they had lost the war. France and Britain might have turned to fascism in this timeline because they would have lost the war in this timeline. Meanwhile, Germany would have kept its gains in Eastern Europe under the Brest-Litovsk Treaty, meaning much of Eastern Europe would have been under German hands. In this world, World War II would have been France, Britain, Russia, and Japan rebelling against the Central Powers victors of World War I. With the vast economic forces of America on the side of the Central Powers, we can assume that the Central Powers would have won World War II and the Allies again would have been crushed. After the end of the war, the US and Germany would have a Cold War. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this timeline, please comment or subscribe. Whatifalthist. Thank you for watching.